Welcome to this episode of the Think Wildlife podcast. Today I speak to Mr. Kishor Rithe, who is the founder and director of the Satpuda Foundation. The Satpuda Foundation works predominantly on tiger conservation in central India. In 2022, Kishore was also appointed as a director of the Bombay Natural History Society, which is one of the oldest and most prestigious wildlife NGOs in India, focusing on lesser um, known species such as the Great Indian Bustard and the lesser florican. Welcome, Kishore, sir, to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here to talk about the great work you have done with Satpuda Foundation. In 2001, you established Satpuda Foundation. What was the idea behind this, and what is your long-term vision?
So it's actually I had already started working since 1990s in and around Melghat and established one organization called Nature Conservation Society Amravati, mainly to work on education, conservation, wildlife protection, and I had already set up the conservation model in Melghat. And I wanted to replicate that model across the Satpuda landscape. And I had already decided to spend my whole life for the conservation. And that's why I thought that I should then have the larger goal in the life. And that's why I decided to set up the Satpuda Foundation so that mainly I can replicate what I had done in and around Melghat across the Satpuda landscape and then do some site specific changes and work on conservation. So that was the whole idea why I set up Satpuda Foundation, another organization in 2001.
What makes the Satpuda landscape so special?
Satpuda is the oldest mountain, and I believe that tiger survival uh, for the long term basis will be only possible in the mountainous ranges like Satpuda or the Western Ghats. And this landscape has got some around 300 rivers which are originating through small and big rivers which are originating through this mountain, and it has dry deciduous forest, and it has a sal forest, it has a teak forest, and the enormous amount of biodiversity. So that makes the Satpura landscape very special. It is oldest than the Himalayas. So, and if you look at the biodiversity, uh, uh, the entire ecosystem in the mountainous Satpura landscape is um, from tigers to forest owlet to mahasir. If you look at the species diversity, that's fantastic.
What are the main threats to the conservation of the Satpuda landscape?
Initially, when I started, definitely poaching and wildlife trade was the biggest threat. But if you ask me today, infrastructure development, which is taking place all inside the protected area, outside the protected area, in the buffer areas, corridors. So that is really posing a big threat to the biodiversity of Satpura landscape. Poaching, of course, it is controlled, uh, but still poaching is a threat. And another threat that has come in last, especially 2 decades, that's a pesticide impact on the biodiversity. And recently, climate change is also posing a serious threat to the biodiversity of Satpura landscape.
So, central India has the highest population of tigers in the wild, followed closely by the Western Ghats. So, what makes this region such a successful tiger conservation story?
See, tiger is a that way prolific breeder, but it requires flatlands and rivers, that means perennial source of water. And that usually in the mountainous range, it is uh, hardly available. But in Satpura landscape, you have the mountainous landscape, but still it has got flatlands and it has got many rivers, though they are seasonal rivers, but that makes it very special. During summer season, there is a scarcity of water, which pose challenge before the wildlife, and during monsoon and winter, all these rivers get rejuvenated and provide fresh life to all the creatures. So another important aspect is there is a range link hypothesis. That means the northern ranges, northeastern ranges, northern ranges, central Indian range, that means the Satpuda range, and the western Ghats, eastern Ghats, all these ranges used to be linked with each other through the corridors, forest corridors. And that that connectivity is still available. And I think Satpuda has not lost that connectivity and the biodiversity, and that makes it very special and successful for tiger conservation. And if you look at the tiger population, the way it has increased in especially past 15 years, it has proved that Satpuda landscape has got the potential to even double the present tiger population. Initially, when I started the work in Vidarbha landscape of Satpuda landscape, we used to have 150 tigers. Today, they have reached to 400 tigers. And we can reach to 400, 800 tigers in Vidarbha landscape alone. But for that, we need to protect tiger corridors. And that's a very challenging and crucial job right now.
I was going to ask you about the tiger corridors and their importance, which you already spoke about. So, what is being done in the Satpuda landscape and the greater central Indian landscape to improve the tiger corridors between the protected area network?
See, when you talk about the landscape conservation, and especially in context of tiger conservation, then tigers require inviolate, means human habitation free core areas for to breed safely, and same time when tigers disperse around the area called as the buffer area, that also requires the protection. Even tigers flourish in buffer areas, and they disperse in the adjoining tiger areas like the tiger reserve or any protected area like sanctuary national park. They require corridor for the safe migration from one area to other area. We call it a source sink dynamics. And just for these two things, it is very essential to protect the tiger corridors between two tiger areas. They may be tiger reserves, they may be other protected areas like sanctuaries, national parks. But connectivity, forest connectivity especially, is important. Tigers do disperse through even agricultural landscape, but they pose serious threat like poaching, etc. And that's why safe passage through forest connectivity is essential in Satpura landscape.
The Satpuda Foundation has helped with the relocation of 10 villages from tiger reserves in Maharashtra. So, what is the idea of relocating these villages from protected areas to outside?
See, as I said, tiger is a prolific breeder, but it requires inviolate, that means human habitation free core areas. And that requires around 1000 to 1200 square kilometer inviolate area for the safe breeding. And that's impossible because all our protected uh, uh, areas are of just 200 to 300 square kilometer size. And that's why you need bigger areas. There are hardly few tiger reserves where core areas are having 1000 to 1200 square kilometer area available to for the breeding of tigers. And that's why if you look at all our 53 tiger reserves in India, uh, you don't have the situation where you have 1,000 to 1,200 square kilometer area available for the safe breeding of tigers. And that was the biggest challenge even in the Satpuda landscape. We have Male Ghat Tiger Reserve where we have 1,200 square kilometer core available. But even within that area, there were a lot of villages. And that's why Government of India and especially National Tiger Conservation Authority has decided to relocate some of the villages if those villages are voluntarily ready to get relocated. And that is possible because even villagers are facing a lot of problems, especially their population, human population has increased, but agriculture land available is the same. Only 40% households have got the agriculture land. 60% households don't have agriculture lands and they are landless. They don't have any jobs. So that population want to go out close to the market, get more avenues, jobs, or alternate livelihood options available. And that's why all these villages also voluntarily ready to get resettled. So that was a win-win for villagers as well as wildlife. And that's why National Tiger Conservation Authority has announced a good package of relocation. And that's how we could announce that package. And Satpuda Foundation, Nature Conservation Society, all the organizations working in central India, they have actually taken this package to the villagers and ensured that nobody in the village is unsatisfied. They should definitely get all the civic amenities and all the benefits of the package. And that's why it is just like win-win. And people initially were not believing that voluntarily it is possible. But yes, voluntary relocation is possible, and that has shown and proved in central India.
Village resettlement for conservation is often very controversial in India. Why is this the case, and what are some of the key challenges to village resettlements?
See, Indian uh, government have initially and even today have made it clear that villages can be resettled only if they are voluntarily ready to resettle. And that's why it's a voluntary relocation. So in voluntary relocation, the biggest challenge is villagers want the better options close to the markets. What is their requirement? Their requirement is they should get enough agriculture land. That agriculture land should be free from wildlife depredation, and then there should be better job opportunities available at that location. So India is a overpopulated country, and getting such kind of agriculture lands available for each and every household and getting enough job opportunities available all together at one location is hardly possible. And that's why that was the biggest challenge. So that makes the entire rate of village relocation very slow. And as it is voluntary relocation, villagers have to go and find out these kind of lands and availability of agriculture lands, jobs, etc. And then only they give consent to the government. And that's when government comes in picture, and then they extend resettlement package to the families. That was the challenge. Second challenge was sensibility of the officers, because uh, village relocation is just like a birth of a village, and as every birth is very tedious, so birth of a village is a very big event, and in that we need to have the sensible officers. So when you get the proper sensible officers, and a good leadership in the village and good NGOs, when they all come together, you make the village relocation successful. And that is what has been achieved in central India. And even the senior government officers have ensured that some sensible officers get posted in the tiger reserves as well as in the revenue department where village relocation is going on. And that has made village relocation successful in the states like Maharashtra and especially Madhya Pradesh, which comes in the Satpuda landscape.
How did you guys tackle the challenges of the relocation of the 10 villages?
See, it's very important to understand any non-government organization or the individual who works with the villagers and who works with the government officers to on the subject like village relocation. We need to think like you are the beneficiary. And if that person or his entire household is getting shifted from uh, their original place, then what are the challenges that they will have to face at the new location? The new place will be totally new. It won't have enough infrastructure at, at the beginning, and they will face many problems over there. So, all these problems need to be anticipated by the NGOs, and that we had anticipated. And we spent initially more time to establish this process. It was very much important to win the trust because people had bad experiences of village relocation in some of the areas. They were thrown out, they were deprived of even basic civic amenities, and that had actually created a challenge before the government to build the trust. And that trust building took a lot of time in Melghat because Melghat was the first area from where we had resettled villages. So once we established that trust and the entire process later on with the help of the government, it made us very easy for resettlement of other villages. But initially, for the resettlement of three villages from Melghat Tiger Reserve, all of us, including the government officers, spent more time and to set up the process and make it successful. But once it was made successful, rest of the villages they came forward and they petitioned for their resettlement, and then government came forward to provide same resettlement package in an advanced way available to these villages.
So, talk a bit about the Satpuda Landscape Tiger program, which SF is a part of.
Yes. See, this is the era where multi stakeholders need to come together and work on the convergence because one organization, one stakeholder is not competent or capable enough to address all the issues, especially when finance is the constraint and there are several other constraints. So, to resolve this, it is very much important that all the stakeholders need to come together. And so, convergence is the key for the sustainable development. And that was achieved when the like minded non government organizations came forward. And thanks to Bombay Foundation UK, which actually brought them together, and we had set up the program called Satpuda Landscape Tiger Program in 2004. And where initially, all the organizations did not know how to work together. There were some conflicting issues, but later on, they handled the situation and they learned how to work together. And not only non government organizations, they started working together with the government agencies and not only forest department and wildlife department, but all other departments like revenue department, irrigation department, and other departments who are also working on providing setting up infrastructures, etc. So that mechanism has now completed 20 years this year, and it has successfully established the conservation model. And around 10 non-government organizations and then government organizations have shown that if you work together, you definitely get success. And that's that is also one of the factors why tiger population is increasing. And in spite of having some human tiger conflict, still people have also built the tolerance among themselves. And now Satpuda landscape has produced more tigers, and tigers are dispersing, grabbing corridors, buffer areas, and then later on corridors. And even these organizations working together to address some of the infrastructure issues in the corridors and suggesting avoidance or mitigation strategy to the government. And that has just been possible because non-government organizations have learned how to work with the government agencies.
So, Satpuda Foundation is also working on the development of the tiger conservation plan for the Navigao Nagzira landscape. So, could you just talk a bit about this conservation plan?
See, tiger conservation plans are different than the wildlife management plans. Any sanctuary or a national park has got a wildlife management plan. And these plans are like the Bible or the Gita of conservation. So, uh, tiger conservation plans are specifically prepared to address the requirements, scientific and objective requirements of the tiger conservation. So that is number one. Number two, tiger reserves have got core, buffer, and corridors. So all the tiger conservation plans must have prescriptions for core, like the village resettlement and post resettlement habitat improvement of the core areas. In buffer, we have to work with the communities, human settlements living in the buffer areas, minimize their anthropogenic pressure on the tiger habitat by providing alternate livelihood options to the villagers. And in the corridor, there are multiple partners, there are multiple government agencies working on different developmental aspects like the irrigation department, state electricity board, and railways, etc. So all these agencies need to appreciate that these are the tiger corridors and they are for the long term development of the country. And that's why while conceiving or while implementing these projects, developmental projects in the corridor, they need to either avoid those corridors or they need to mitigate and ensure that there is less pressure on the tiger habitat. So that's why these tiger conservation plans are very crucial, and they guide all the department, all the stakeholders how to conduct these developmental activities in the buffer areas as well as corridors. And Satpuda Foundation and personally, I was on the NTCA committee to guide the tiger conservation plans of all the tiger reserves in central India. And Satpuda Foundation specially provided inputs for preparing these tiger conservation plans of tiger reserves in central India.
So, Satpuda Foundation is also involved in the eco restoration of degraded landscape. So, could you talk about these projects?
Yeah, as I said that uh, tigers require inviolate areas, and that's why government is working on voluntary village relocation. So once you relocate villages, then you have to restore back those landscapes. After resettlement, usually those empty spaces are grabbed by invasive species like Lantana camara, Prosopis juliflora. So you need to uproot those species. You need to restore them, restore these habitats by planting indigenous grass species. And we have worked with the academic institutions, and especially some of the scientists, botanists came forward like Dr. Muratkar, and they set up the model how to restore these landscapes. So we are closely working with the specialists like Dr. Muratkar and other institutions, academic institutions, and Tiger Reserve NGOs and the institutions. They have formed the collaboration consortium, and we are restoring those landscapes. So that is being done in the core areas, it is being done in the buffer areas as well as in the corridors. And some of the corridors are really they are deteriorated because of overgrazing, because of other pressures, anthropogenic pressures. And these patches are very much important to restore. So some of the areas are infested with lantana and prosopis. So we are guiding the government and preparing the eco-restoration plans, as well as helping forest department to helping by providing technical advice for eco-restoration.
So, how is Satpuda Foundation supporting anti-poaching work in Melga Tiger Reserve?
When we started working in and around Melghat Tiger Reserve during 1990s, poaching and wildlife trade was the biggest threat that time. And that's why we had to work extensively on to stop poaching and wildlife trade. So initially for 10 years, we had set up our network of informers. We trained the forest officers and other honorary wildlife wardens how to make effective raids, how to gather intelligence, how to process that information, and then how to make raids and then follow up those cases in the court of law. So all that was done during first 10 years, so 1990 to 2000. And then we had made several raids. We arrested poachers, traders with tiger skins, leopard skins, other wildlife derivatives. And then later on, we realized that fighting cases in the court of law and gathering evidence through forest department was a very crucial step uh, if you really want to address this particular threat. So we had done that, and later on uh, we continued those training programs at different in different areas. And forest department as well as police department helped in the entire thing. And that's how then later on in next 10 years, lot of notorious traders and poachers went behind bars, and even judicial system has imposed uh, uh, even they rejected bails, they imposed fines, and in some cases they sent them for imprisonment. So all that has made a good impact, and we could control tiger poaching and wildlife trade in Satpuda landscape.
So, Satpuda Foundation also works extensively on alternative livelihood and community conservation projects. So, could you please elaborate a bit about these projects?
As I said about poaching and trade, so actually there are international gangs, there are interstate gangs who are operating in and around tiger reserves. But it is not possible unless they get support of locals. And locals will only support these gangs if they are not happy with the pace of development and they are not getting enough jobs locally. So that's why later on in after 2000, we have focused all our activities on providing alternate livelihoods as well as jobs to especially tribal youths. And then for almost 10 years, we have provided jobs to around 5,000 tribal youths in the form of gypsy drivers to hospitality and tourism management, and they became the ambassador for tiger protection. So when you make them partner, and now the same tribal youths proudly show the tigers on their livelihood, uh, bought their gypsies, bought their vehicles. Even some of them have got jobs at the block level, and this has this was the game changer. I think today the community, especially if they are deprived of livelihood options, then they cannot support you in conservation. And in central India, it has shown that it is possible. Conservation has got a potential to provide alternate livelihoods, based livelihoods, as well as jobs to thousands of people, and especially the tribal youths. So this model, I think, need to be adopted in the green skill program of the government of India and the state governments, because due to that program, we were able to protect the tigers, and that is possible even for protecting and conserving other wildlife species.
So you were recently appointed as the director of the Bombay Natural History Society. How does it feel to be appointed to this role at such a prestigious and historic conservation organization?
See, while working through Nature Conservation Society Amravati or a Satpuda Foundation, I was always associated with Bombay Natural History Society, because BNHS is an umbrella organization, and BNHS is 140 years old organization working with so many government and non-government organizations across the country. So I was always associated with BNHS. I became life member of BNHS at very early age, and then I became the uh, member of the governing council of BNHS. Later on, I got elected in 2022 as a honorary secretary of BNHS, and recently I got selected as a director of BNHS. So it's a proud moment, because I have worked with this society since last 25 years and have seen big people working for this organization, and the people like stalwarts like S.H. Prater, Santa Pau, all they have worked, because this organization was set up in 1883, and it is later on known by Dr. Salim Ali, Humayun Abdul Ali, and they have done exemplary work through this society. So today I feel really proud to become work as a director of this organization. Our focus is on lesser known species and the landscapes. Uh, so that's what BNHS is working right now.
So could you just provide us a very brief history of BNHS?
See, BNHS history is similar to the history of India, and especially for last 150 years. BNHS was established in 1883. We need to also understand that Forest Department was set up by British in 1864, and just after 20 years BNHS was established by the same British officers, army officers especially. They were working in central India that time, and many officers used to shoot, hunt the wild animals, collect their trophies. Some of the officers were very keen in investigation, and then observing those trophies, and then doing detailed study, and they used to share their observations, and that's when they decided that let's establish one organization like Bombay Natural History Society in 1883. They had six British and two Indian had set up this organization, And just for exchanging their observations and notes, they thought that we should also start a journal, scientific journal, and they had started JBNHS in 1886. So this journal, BNHS, has continued to publish in last 136 years continuously, except 1 year, when there was a Second World War. So BNHS, yes, it has done a lot of things in last 140 years, and it is continuously publishing JBNHS journal, which is a very prestigious journal. It has got the oldest library. It has, and all these officers and later on Indian scientists, they collected the specimen and they were kept preserved at its collection department. So BNHS has got around 1,40,000 specimen at the Hornbill House in Mumbai, and they are well preserved. They were all collected from the old Hindustan, which was spread in today's Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal. So all these specimens were collected from these regions. And today, anybody, if is interested to do further studies or research on species, they have got these specimens available for the further research. And so this is a treasure for all the scientists and for further studies like genetic studies, etc. These specimens kept at the BNHS collection department, and also the oldest books of natural history kept in the library of BNHS. They are very valuable assets, and youngsters should come and take advantage of this collection. So apart from that, BNHS is also involved in a lot of other projects in the field.
So, what is your long-term vision at PNHS?
See, our long-term vision is already described by the governing council of BNHS, and all the governing council members are very knowledgeable, very experienced, and they have almost already spent 20, 30, 40 years in the field. So we have decided to focus on lesser known species like Great Indian Bustard, Lesser Floricon, vultures, green munia, finch weaver baya, Indian schemers. So these kind of species. Now all these species, if you look at their populations, they are either less than 1,000 or less than 500 or less than 100. So if you compare it with all other charismatic species like tigers, which are more than 4,000 available in India, these species are either 1,000 or less than 100. So our priority is protecting these lesser known species through ex situ and in situ conservation simultaneously, because some of the species really need the conservation breeding in the captivity, so that we can release them in the wild and then ensure that these species do not go extinct. So that's our highest priority right now.
What have been some of your most prominent challenges you have faced during your conservation career?
See, I remember past 30, 35 years of my life of working in the central Indian highlands and Satpuda landscape. First 15 years were really tough because I did not have any identity and I was young student, understanding, learning most of the aspects. And also, whenever youngsters like me see injustice or see some uh, uh, deterioration, destruction of nature, then obviously you jump on and to address that particular issue. So first 15 years were really tough because I was without resources, I was without any assistance, I was without any guidance. And then slowly I could get support of like minded people, like minded friends. experts, other mentors, and I got very good mentors during that period, and even later on till today, who helped me to overcome through these hurdles. Fighting with poachers and traders was a tough job initially, and later on, infrastructure proponents also, uh, because they came with lot of infrastructure projects in the buffer areas and corridors. But by that time, I became part of the government expert committees where I could address these infrastructure projects. So we had given them some of the places we had almost said no, and to avoid ask them to avoid the particular tiger habitat, and they did it. Like the Melghat railway line, etc., has actually saved the core area of Melghat. And similarly, there are a lot of examples where infrastructure agencies also avoided those areas, virgin areas. And uh, later on, we work with the infrastructure proponents, project proponents, to evolve the mitigation measures, and that also worked in some of the areas. Consultation with the government to win their trust uh, was was my focus initially, and that has really helped me a lot, because initially government officers who were not understanding our position, through consultations they came to the same page, and then they only suggested us the way out, and that has really made the further battle simple. Media helped us a lot to spread the entire conservation battle to the masses, and we could gather support because of the media. And whenever we found that the government system is not listening, not sensible, and in spite of media campaigns, they are not giving us positive support, then we approach to the judicial system. And their judicial system has helped us because we were following the legal framework of this country. So this particular approach has actually made our uh, campaigns, made our targets easy. But yes, there were a lot of challenges while overcoming, while addressing these issues and getting successes.
So, what have been some of your biggest learnings from your conservation career?
I would say that we need to be prepared to stay long in a particular landscape. We should not be focused on only few protected areas or few wildlife habitats. Our vision should be landscape based, and we should be ready to stay for a longer duration of time in the landscape. We need to be consistent. One has to be, one has to fighting spirit, and we need to be very open to listen and learn. And we should practice science based conservation. So these are, I think, these are the biggest lessons for me. And uh, with the help of these things, I could really accomplish some of the conservation achievement.
So, how can individuals contribute to the Satpuda Foundation and the Bombay Natural History Society?
Both Satpuda Foundation as well as Bombay Natural History Society believe that youngsters can make a difference. And if you want them to be with us in this conservation campaign, then you need to build the capacities of these youngsters. And that is only possible through the programs like internship program, volunteering activity, or networking them to create more awareness, or conservation, taking conservation actions, or doing research on species and habitats. So BNHS and Satpuda Foundation both have got lot of opportunities. Students should definitely come at their early age in these organizations and grab the opportunities, like they conduct training courses to build your capacities. You should join them, and then you should, as I said earlier, you should be ready to stay long, be consistent, and you must have fighting spirit. If all these capabilities you have, definitely you can do science based conservation, and we can you can definitely be part uh, of species conservation and habitat protection for the wildlife conservation in India.
That was the final question I had for you today. Thank you so much for taking time out for this interview.
Thank you, Anish.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Also, I've attached a few links to some of the best books on tiger conservation in India in the description below, so do check them out.